Can we go ahead and proceed with roll call?
Johnson? O'Halloran? Yes. Lopez Caniva? Strite?
Yes.
Hayes? Here. Garrettson?
Here.
Shaw?
Do we want to move forward with the Pledge of Allegiance?
We do.
Okay. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Moving through the agenda, it looks like,
You have to have a motion, and you've got two curriculum committee members, so they could motion, move it, and approve it. Non-curriculum committee members do not say aye. They don't take a roll call.
can I have a motion?
I will motion.
And then you need a second,
Second? Thank you.
and then you just need an all in favor aye.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Then we move on to approval of bills payable report.
And we just, with the board meeting, we had a few bills just at the end of the month here. It would assist the business department to approve those. You know, they're listed on that link. There's an addendum to last week's treasurer's report. Just 2 pages of bills.
Do I have a motion to approve the bills payable report?
I'll second.
Thank you. And what is the roll call?
And then we have to call the roll call.
Roll call?
O'Halloran? Yes. Strite?
Yes.
Hayes?
Abstain.
Not on the bills payable.
Not bills payable, okay. Yes.
Garrettson?
Yes. Okay. Then we have approval for new course proposals for the 26-27 school year. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Wendy, do I have a second?
So I can second it?
Mm-hmm.
Second.
And maybe before the roll call, just to explain the board.
Yeah.
Last week, you know, Dr. Shaw, Mrs. O'Halloran, Mrs. Strite are all part of and Mrs. Johnson are all part of the curriculum committee. We were working with Dr. Cristofero on these new course proposals. And a couple members came in and said, oh, we looked at the test-taking skills class and noticed it said juniors only. And a number of board members on the committee said, we thought it was going to be for sophomores and juniors. So rather than just on the spot and me not doing my homework, and not having a chance to talk to Dr. Cristofero, I didn't want to make a misstep because maybe a whole group of people, for reasons that I wasn't thinking of, were thinking it should be limited to juniors. We just decided to table this this memo. We talked this week, added in, it's for grade 10, grade 11. That's how the board would approve it. And so that's the only change to this memo from what you saw last week is it's open to grade 10, open to grade 11. That's it. But kind of the proper way to do it rather. And we were meeting this week, why do it on the fly?
Thank you. So we have a first and a second. Roll call?
Hayes?
Yes.
Garrettson?
Yes.
Strite?
Yes.
O'Halloran?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, then we'll move to discussion items, the 2025 Annual Academic Achievement Report.
All right. And what we're going to do is we'll do this very much committee style. We'll be checking to see if we hear from Mrs. Johnson. You know, had not heard from her. President Shaw is likely coming, you know, but delayed and life interrupts. Sometimes it just does things that we, you know, don't want it to do.
For sure.
This is really interesting because I've never seen this before. Could someone tap that for me before it shuts down?
I'm doing it.
Cancel, thank you. We have a lot of gremlins tonight.
One more.
You have one more what?
Voting.
Recording the vote.
Oh, just one more vote to record.
Oh, okay.
I'm almost done with that.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead and do it. So tonight we're really going to dive into the academic performance that we had last year, 2024, 2025. First and foremost, two things to point out, a brand new format that we hope is more accessible. Our vision is getting this to real estate agents, the mayors, elected representatives, our feeder districts. So we wanted to make it more consumable. So huge thanks to Jeanette Castillo, and then to Eric Slager. All the design here that you see is Eric's work. That would not have been possible without Kelly Featherling, who is our new assessment coordinator. She really, at working with Pat Dean, supplied all the data, cover to cover, that you see. Really, everything was pulled from her job. And we really tried to slim this down from a binder that was about 140 pages. So there were things we could really, the public can consume, you could consume. I want to thank everybody on the front of this. Dr. Cristofero really spearheaded and organized this project to kind of make this deliverable. Dr. Huntington helped her. Huge support from our principals, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Green, and then Mr. Beach, who in his role really oversees curriculum and instruction here at East Campus. So really everybody listed here. Angela Adolph's on here as well, providing some community data. Just huge round of thanks to get something like this that represents our students' achievement. Traditionally, the board has done this in advance of the Illinois School Report Card, because this includes many of the important metrics in the Illinois School Report Card. 3 top metrics: graduation rate, which now counts for the most, freshmen on track, and then accountability testing, which in the state of Illinois now is ACT. But we also include here metrics that are aligned with the 5 board goals, and that are also aligned with my superintendent goals. So we also use this board meeting to say, well, what are our goals? What are we really pursuing? And if I gave the board, what we always try to do, any lesson, when I do my lesson at college, I open up by saying, what is the goal of this lesson? And I would give board members 2 instructional goals. The first is the absolute importance of multiple measures, that no single measure really ever tells an institutional comment on student performance. The analogy I make is very few of us have gone to the doctor and just stopped at being weighed and measured. Can you imagine if you just walked in and you were weighed and measured and suddenly someone declared you healthy or unhealthy? You would want more measures. If any of us have ever taken a blood test, now we can open it up on our My Chart and see that there's about 20 different indicators in there that examine our total health. Sometimes your physician, in my case, my cholesterol, which I'm just always chasing, my physician will say, yeah, it's not exactly where I want it to be, but look at all these other indicators where you're extremely healthy. I don't think it's a huge worry. If I just obsess over my cholesterol, I'm going to be obsessed. So instructional goal number 1, multiple measures, the importance of multiple measures, and not reducing student performance down to any single measure. The main reason why is that can not tell the full truth. The second goal, I would say, that's very important for board members, a really important role that you play, is being a community spokesperson. Much like me, people will turn to you and say, well, tell me about the state of affairs of academics. And they'll generally give you no more than 5 minutes. You have to have your elevator speech ready. So if we can help you develop your elevator speech on what is going really well and what are the areas that we need to work on, those are the 2 goals tonight. What are the multiple measures? And what's your elevator speech? I'm going to tease you a little bit because I do have, I can log into the Illinois School Report Card. I'm not supposed to show it to you, so I'm going to click on this and I'll just, show you the top where you can't see anything, right? You can't see any of the data below. This is embargoed until Thursday. So there are some different things here that I think in general I told you our corrected graduation rate is in here. The ACT is in here. Right now, if you go to the Illinois School Report Card, it's 2023, 2024. This will be 2024, 2025. I want to follow what ISBE says and not show this in public. We'll come back November 17th. We'll show you. I think you'll see some real increases in proficiency on the ACT. It's a different test. And for the first time, they have growth metrics. We have never had on the high school level for the Illinois School Report Card growth metrics. Next month, you'll see that we've had some real growth, both in math and in reading, in English language arts, which is important because proficiency is one issue, but it's an average. Averages are not always mathematically, statistically trustworthy. But growth, I think the guarantee of this institution, anybody who comes to our institution from whatever center district, we want them to grow. So you'll get a description of, well, do we have excellent growth? Do we have above average growth, below average growth, or significantly below average growth? Hint, I don't want to be a spoiler alert, it's not excellent, but it's not in the three lower categories. So you've got some above average growth and you've got some average growth, which I think the first time out, you might know last year, our ACT test takers like Evelyn did not get practice because we did 2 practice rounds and the ACT still doesn't 100% have their act together. We even had last week some colleagues who had a tough time with their test codes. So that's all preface, for a variety of different things that we'll get into. So with your permission, what I really thought, if we could do this kind of activity style, we thought of a variety of activities, a number of different people kind of coming in and out. And I was just thinking of going section by section, doing a couple things. One, just each section having a little bit of an activity with purpose, then having a focus set of pages, and then opening it up with that section to the board for questions about that section. And then trying to be a timekeeper. Usually our committee meetings are an hour. You've been generous enough to say, we'll go a little bit longer than an hour. We have snacks for you back here if you fatigue, tire, or get weary, right? But we promise not to have you here really, past like 7. So is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Does that work? Anything that, from anyone that we missed? So let's roll up our sleeves and do it. So hey, could I have you just take a look in section 1? And what I would ask you to do, I was going to bring Post-its, but I got a little bit thrown off kilter. If you're comfortable in your own, this is yours to keep if you want to mark it up. But could I ask you to do this? Could I ask you to do 2 things? If you just scan the very first section, we'll just maybe 2-3 minutes on this. Scan the executive summary on academic excellence and post-secondary readiness. If you could try to find 2 or 3 key facts in here, just things that you think are key in the executive summary. And then if we could try to draw an inference, if we were going to tell people what's going on with grades, graduation rate, what's going on with freshmen on track, what is going on with those? So let's just take a second, look at the, try to find 2 to 3 facts, like, wow, oh, we have Post-its. That doesn't surprise me. If you don't want to write in your, 2 to 3 facts that really struck you in the executive summary. And then let's see if we can get an inference about what all of this information tells us. Just a few minutes. Sometimes when I would do this with students, I'd say, is there a striking line? Is something that jumped out at you? One or two. And it doesn't have to be, there's a lot of text. Hey, Lynn. Let me give it just 30 more seconds, just see, we'll maybe go around and, see what struck you as Mrs. Johnson gets settled. Just what was something that kind of jumped out at you, a fact, something in the executive summary that just struck you for whatever reason it struck you. And Evelyn, you're going first because you're doing this all day long, right? Hey, Luann.
God bless you.
Luann, do you need a water or anything like that? Water? Yeah. Oh, thanks. Cheers. We've got regular water and then some different, carbonated waters if you're interested in that kind of thing. Evelyn, do you mind jumping in? Just whatever struck you, just something that, in the executive report, just what struck you and why?
I think the thing that struck me was one, the 19% of students achieved a GPA above 4.0, which I think is very successful for our school, as well as the integrated science class versus chemistry class. I didn't realize we had an integrated science class in the first place, but seeing that there's been a huge increase, or at least a increase in scores when it comes to chemistry versus that integrated science class, it's quite showing that our students are ready to be able to take classes that are a lot harder than what they were previously taking, and that they can improve a lot in those classes, because chemistry is quite a hard course, but they were
You've
able to
been there,
perform well.
right? You've been there.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for being in a good start. Other board members, just something that struck you in the executive summary, just, interesting.
I mean, I'll mention,
Yeah,
it's
thanks,
pretty near
Tammy.
the top, but it's that 69% of the students received or met the GPA required standard for college readiness.
Right.
Interesting. That's an interesting percentage comparable to what, a lot of people can view on the Illinois report card.
Right. And we started climbing up the College and Career Readiness Index, 4 years ago, where we were at about 27%.
Oh,
And
wow.
now that we put that in, there's a number of different things that we've strategically done, like dual credit, like advanced placement, career pathways that have really assisted, and then just general GPA. So great. Other folks, just an observation.
The 96% that's mentioned of students who receive a passing rate in college credit for the Illinois public universities in that the seminar class
Right.
is like super impressive.
Great. Michaeline, Candace, anything that kind of jumped out of you in the executive?
I was looking at both of those. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I was looking at both those as well. I had, and I was also looking at, if you look at the grade distribution of the 4 grade now class of 2028 being 10th graders, you can see the decrease in D's and F's and the increase, and it's steady throughout those 4 classes.
Right.
So as you see that, we're providing more opportunities for students to take classes they're interested in, and changing, the integrated science into chemistry, and changing what we're hoping to do for the social studies. I think that we're providing opportunity for students to take classes that are interest-based and important to their college and career readiness as well. And I think we're gonna see a huge difference in that.
Right, I mean, that, is something, I appreciate you picking that up, because there's been this upward movement, right? We started a few years ago just using a phrase, even before we worked with equal opportunity schools, called leveling up. We knew the Illinois Accelerated Placement Act was coming, so we thought, well, we should start getting good at that, right? We started practicing leveling up, then EOS helped us level up. Then we started looking, like you mentioned, at coursework, and Evelyn mentioned, with fewer students in integrated science, more in chemistry, which will, biology, chemistry, physics is sort of the holy triangle of the ACT, and then the same, in a variety of different areas. So when we've done that, we've had success. Candace, I don't know if there's something just to contribute that struck you.
Kind of mirroring off of what others have already said, the 69% met GPA standards jumped out at me. And then the core areas, I just did not know that there were only certain classes that were really looked at and measured in terms of the success. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That was something I did not know or even think about before.
Right, and I'll have in a minute Dr. Cristofero, because there'll be a spotlight page we'll look at. But we just look, we look at all the courses. We can pull all 264 courses. But we have a few critical ones that either, like sophomore English generally is a gateway class. That success there tells you a lot how students are going to. Hey, does somebody have some paper towels in back? We just had a little spill here. Hey, we can get it for you, Michaeline, or yeah, there's napkins right there. Thanks so much. Or U.S. history because it's required, or generally Math 1 because we have students coming from 7 feeder districts, right? So we just look at those to be sort of temperature checks, right? It doesn't mean we're not looking at all the courses, but just kind of temperature checking. That's a really, really tight way to scope in and see what's going on and what's happening. So let's try to do this. All
Can I ask
right?
a
Thank
super
you.
quick question?
Oh, yeah, of course.
I'm just kind of curious, it said that, it says here the offered integrated science class, which was not considered to be on grade level, was it higher or lower?
It was a lower grade
It was a
level.
lower grade.
So we had much more enrollments, Tammy, in integrated science. At one time, we had 5 sections down to 3 sections. Now I think we're down to 2 sections. And we asked the question, can we migrate those students? Because that was a course that was not a lab science class, and it was also a course that really, if you're flight pathing to the ACT, it's likely not going to give you the kind of rigor that you need to do well in the ACT. As we moved students over, they were more and more successful in that more rigorous environment. That's also what we're thinking about with social studies too.
For sure.
And that's not to diminish a lot of other courses that offer rigor, but it's just a different type of rigor, which I'll mention just in a moment. So let me ask you this question. If we had to pull this all together, what you just heard from each other, if we had to make an inference now, we have all this data. Anybody want to try to pull it all? What's the message? If you had to take this whole paragraph and say, oh, grades at Lockport Township High School, what are grades telling you? Could you do it in 1 or 2 sentences? Evelyn, you look like you want to do it so badly.
I would think that this is telling us that our students are very much on level with where we should be, and that they're showing like a continuous growth and continuous improvement, and it's a constant thing. And with the classes that are more rigorous, they're showing that our students can really achieve those high scores in those classes, and that if we push them more and more, they'll be able to still achieve those things if we go at a constant rate.
Okay, can I read that back to you? This is your inference. And let me just check for understanding, all right? You said that students are performing grade-wise on level where we expect them to be. They're demonstrating continuous growth over time, both in a school year and then over time. And then they're performing well when they're placed in more rigorous courses that might seem to be above their ability level.
Yes.
That is your inference.
Yes.
And you're standing by it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can we give a thumbs up if we can agree with Evelyn?
I do.
Might not be your inference, but we agree with Evelyn's inference. Okay, all right, we're not, we're not being disagreeable. So, yeah, Luann,
Isn't this why we offered more AP classes?
it is,
And tried to encourage the students to get into AP because we felt that
exactly.
they could actually, do better.
No, absolutely. And there's a little separate section for AP, so I'm not kicking that down the road. We'll get into that. And we have Dr. Cristofero, we're going to spotlight pages 6 and 7 here. But the reason why I wanted to do that with you, and I apologize if I felt, and Lori, if you could join us at the table. I'm not trying to be overly school marmy with you. And I would say that what I just did for everybody in the room is a very basic and not even really well done reading in the content area for inference. What we just did at the end of this workshop, I am going to say is the most important thing we should be doing. And I'm saying it for my leader colleagues as well. What do we notice is going on here? One, the text is in front of you. Wendy and I have talked about this. You can touch the text. You have it in front of you. Number two, we're reading together. We're being asked to read in the instructional moment. Number three, you're being asked in a small way. If I was a classroom teacher, I had more time, I'd ask you to interact with it more muscularly. We'd dig a little bit deeper. But I'm asking you to take facts, statements made in this statement, and can we put it all together in this thing called an inference? What Evelyn read to us, if we go back, we will never see what I wrote on this Post-it that you said. We'll never see it in this text. This is your inference. And I would say this is the number one skill that when we do item analysis for our students, this is where students of all ages, it's not surprising, they have a weakness. And so I just want to do a little demo of what we just need to see more and more and more in our classes with text. In every single discipline, art, family and consumer science, social studies, math, deals with text. But sometimes in kind of the Chromebook era, we've just sort of run right past the text into the ideas of the text, but summarizing, that's what you did. And then I asked you to summarize and make an inference. And that's a really important, it's probably the most important skill because it's a linchpin to everything else. Think about how many times the day in your just regular day, you get facts thrown at you and you have to make an inference, right? So we're going to spotlight, not to run over your questions, but 6 and 7. And Lori, can you just tell us a little bit about why this kind of goes to your observation, Candace? We got a lot of pages in here about grades, and anybody back here who wants to chime in, please do, or join us at the table. It's a workshop, so be comfortable. But, just kind of maybe lead us through this. These were the 2 pages we really wanted to spotlight for you in this section.
Hello. So thanks for your commentary. I think Michaeline talked about the aggregate grade distribution. And when Dr. McBride got here, we said, how do we make it so that the board can understand that we follow certain classes more closely? And these were the classes that we selected. So really integrated math, I think it's telling you a story. We're 10 years into it. We bring 7 feeder districts together. And how are our students doing in that classroom with this first time with something called integrated math? So we are seeing a lot of success, and that team of teachers is particularly skilled at identifying where students are struggling before they take a major test or assessment so they can go back and do some reteaching. The next one you already talked about, but just to add, I worked really closely with Dr. Green, our movement of students out of integrated science, which was seen as below grade level, into chemistry. Dr. McBride already said, not only is bio, chem, physics gearing students up for something like the ACT, but we know 80% of our students go on to college, and college science instructors are expecting them to have had that bio, chem, physics, introductory courses and all of those before they take a college science class. But moreover, with our students going into a trade, what trade are you going to go into where you don't have to have the foundation in those areas? And Evelyn, in one of the superintendent's advisory council, she was with a group of students that said, hey, it's just good for our citizens in the United States to have this background knowledge. So it took several years, like Dr. McBride was saying, and we were really strategic in how to move, but then also board, you were gracious enough to give us Chem Plus and Physics Plus so we could support students as they were moving into these more rigorous science classes, but really opening doorways of opportunity for students to take these classes, succeed in these classes, whether they were going on to college, going on to the trades, or just playing the most important role of citizen, right? I think US history, obviously all students have to take that class to graduate. You can see very strong score reports. Most of the students in these classes are getting A's and B's. Our teachers are doing a fantastic job of trying to make the curriculum in those classes relevant to their lived experiences today. And then I would agree with you, Wendy, really remarkable what our AP seminar teachers did. This was the first year of the class. Like all of our AP classes, we had students who were moving in to take AP for the first time in this class, and it was the first time the teachers taught it. So just really strong success. And I think the success of this class goes to the other class that you just approved tonight, and that's AP Research. And that's really students saying, I enjoyed doing the research about a particular topic, which is what students have to do in this class, that I want to do even more. And so we're excited to see what that capstone experience might look like.
And one of the things with seminar, I was talking with Candace about this earlier in the day, the graphic below, we tried to align grades with performance on an independent measure, which is the exam. So you might look at this as a board member saying, wow, look at this grade inflation. 75% of the kids getting A's and B's, right? You might expect a strong performance in an advanced placement class, but you might say, wow, that's a lot of A's and B's. And there is quite a bit. I had a great article from the Atlantic that a colleague gave me just talking about grade inflation. So I always think it's good to look at another measure. Now imagine if we had a graphic like this where we had a lot of students earning A's and B's, but very few students earning 3 or above on the national test. So there's a nice correlation here in that the footnote we put in is that 93, almost 94% of the students on the national test, an independent measure, earned a 3 or above, which the College Board regards as a passing grade. 3, 4, 5 are really the top echelon of grades. So just looking at those mixed measures, and then there's a couple footnotes, underneath each one of these.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
A 3 is not a guarantee as college credit.
It's not. Yeah, it might not.
5 is.
4 and 5, a 3, 4, 5 at a public university are more of a guarantee. At a private university, you see my daughter went to a public university in Ohio. If she had a 3, 4, or 5, it was accepted for credit, not in your major. You couldn't get out of a requirement. So she got credits in science, but she still had to take college level bio, chem, and physics because she was a science major. So they're not going to let you replace a class, but towards total graduation, she got those as credits. My daughter Annie went to a private university. You had to get a 5 to get any kind of credit. That's the difference. In Illinois, now advanced placement has to be accepted by any public university.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. And now just in this section, we just want to open it up to board members. This is kind of our spotlight page, but there might be other pages you want to dive into or you have questions about or questions for this group. Yeah, Wendy.
I do have a question. So
Yeah.
on page 6, where it talks about the integrated science course, I was curious too when Tammy asked about the integrated science class on page 1, where you guys said that it was a lower level class, but the majority, well, I should say in 21, the majority of students got, like, the highest number was D's in 21.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 23, it was still D's. So, but then when we switched it over to chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
that seemed to level out, but integrated science was an easier class, so that's where I'm kind of confused. How come they were doing better in a harder class?
So there's, I think, students were being placed in this lower level class, and I think there weren't maybe role models in the classroom about how do we do good science. Also, there's a lot of research about what were teacher expectations on it. And so that's why we did it slowly, moving some students at a time into chemistry and then really monitoring how they were doing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I've seen this over my career, kind of really as a school principal. I started this when Dr. Cristofero and I worked at Glenbard East. Somewhat counterintuitive, but when you put all the lower level learners into one class, and there's a heap of research behind this, there is no even distribution. There is no academic role model. There is no sideways pairing to up the rigor. Even when teachers like in integrated science work very, very diligently to try to aim the curriculum at those learners, they're one teacher, and in the total classroom, there's no peer pressure towards rigor. You know, other schools, Glenbard East, Neuqua Valley, here, over and over, when learners with the right supports are put in a more rigorous atmosphere, when they're distributed, they're not concentrated. You know, we had Science Plus was added by the board, so we had this support. They begin to achieve, simply because they're not a classroom full of lower level learners. There may be 6 or 7 lower level learners, and they're with other, you know, a scaffolded level of achievers. You know, the common sense I would give you on it, just to, you know, the beyond the academics, I was a collegiate rower. And in my freshman, sophomore year, I was not very skilled, and I wasn't quite as strong to row varsity. But every single Thursday, we got put as 1 or 2 people in a varsity boat. You learned very quickly when you had 1 practice a week with more elite rowers. And really, that's why my junior year, I think I was ready to be at a varsity collegiate level. I don't think I've ever gotten there if all I ever did was freshman and sophomore year work with less competent, less skilled athletes. By having exposure to more skilled athletes, I became a more skilled athlete. And I think you see that over and over and over again. I've done, you know, so many projects like this that have seen that kind of success. So really, I think kind of going back to what Evelyn said in her summation of putting students in more rigorous situations generally produces more rigorous outcomes. It's counterintuitive, right?
Right. I guess the question that comes up in my mind is, you're saying that, and I agree with the more rigorous that the more we challenge.
Right.
I mean, any brain, the more that I think that they will step up to the plate. However, I don't know if what we really, I guess, want to hear is that it's their peers that are bringing that. I mean, I think that that's why we have teachers.
You know, it's both.
To get there.
Right. It really is both, right? Because students also create the learning environment. And, you know, what I'd ask you to imagine is the room is filled with people who struggle with science. Everyone in this room struggles with science. What's the kind of attitude, the disposition? What kind of skills do you see on display? Do we get better when we don't have any peer examples of strong science? For example, Profe Pluma is a Spanish teacher. Do we accelerate in a room of people who no one speaks Spanish? Nobody. Or if we had a room where we had various levels, there's some people who have high proficiency, middle proficiency, low proficiency, right? I don't know, what would you prefer? The mixed class or everybody starts at 0? It depends, right? You know, but you're not going to have any examples of high proficiency. And so you both get a classroom climate issue that a single teacher is working towards, but you also get no skills. You can't do any kind of mixed grouping because everybody has the same skill level. That's probably the best way to keep everybody at the same skill level, and, you know, not have that kind of challenge level. So rather than having everybody pooled like that, having now across the chemistry spectrum, 7 or 8 learners who are also in a more mixed environment, those learners for sure, the longitudinal data on this is that they've improved. They actually rose to the occasion. Right? And you're going to see that when we talk about AP as well.
Then how does that translate into integrated math? So we're keeping integrated math, but we get rid of integrated science?
The two are different. Integrated math is a type of math where you're teaching algebra, geometry, and advanced algebra at the skilled level. Integrated science is really, I think you can go ahead and answer that. The word integrated is not being used in the same way.
Yeah, originally, and yeah,
Yeah.
it was way back when it was a freshman level class. And again, I think people were trying to figure out what do we do or how can we engage students who don't like science or are struggling with science, but putting them all in the same room did not have the desired outcomes, as you mentioned, by the grades. They weren't succeeding. And so by really thinking about, and one of the things we considered, I work with Dr. Green on this, we thought about math. Was math a hindrance for chemistry, for students succeeding in there? But really, our chemistry, even our physics is taught at an algebra level. So as long as students are succeeding in integrated math 1, they should have the math skills to succeed in chemistry and even physics. Now, that's not true of our AP physics, which has calculus in it, right? But for those levels, so we thought about it. But integrated, that name came because there was this kind of like some physical science in there, and then they put a little bit of earth science, a little bit of astronomy, and then a little bit of chemistry in there. That's why it got the integrated name, but it wasn't the same. Like Dr. McBride said, it didn't have lab. Our state was requiring lab science. That's what colleges are expecting. That's what you need on these tests. These experiences in science are really going to help our students in the trades. So that was all the reason for the change.
And this might be a good place to jump to section 2 and have Mr. Beach join us. But before you do that, if I could just point out one thing on page 8, and you got slow me down if I move. But we had another good conversation with Candace. If you look at that graphic on page 8 and you see our corrected graduation rate, really 97%, and then you see 27 who did not graduate. Those 27 come from, do you see where it says SPED students, bless you, returning next year to CCC? So those 15 count the same in the state right now, that's gonna end, as you see below non-SPED final no grad. Those 15 and 12 equal 27. They've been with us 4 years, and air quotes, did not graduate. 12 who are not special ed, they just didn't make it with their class. 15 who were special ed, but technically don't graduate because they transition. It's one of the strange things we don't understand. Everyone else in the middle, expelled, transferred, dropped out, been removed from the population for a different reason, so they're not counted in that mix. That's the way the state looks at them. Everybody okay moving to section 2 and Mr. Beach? Because if we spotlight, and I want to back up, we'll maybe get board members on this, but if we take a look at page 16, this was the spotlight page we wanted to share with you, because it's a very, very similar story here. Luann, you touched on it with advanced placement. What's the headline? Over about 4 years, we've increased advanced placement. Students in course, students taking the test by about 800, but yet our pass rate's gone up by 10%, which is highly unusual. So do you want to take this page, Mr. Beach, and just kind of, what are we looking at and preview it? And then also, I know you have some insight cards too.
Yeah, we'll get to those as well. So yeah, page 16, this is about our partnership with Equal Opportunity Schools. And what we have here, or to give you a little bit of background before we look at the chart. So this was our initiative to really ensure that we have a nice representation of all our students in all our classes, and that's including our honors and in AP classes. So the chart that we have at the top, we're looking at our students that are underserved, so our Black and African American students, Hispanic, Latinx, multiracial, and our Caucasian students that are of low and income, and then there's comparison to the middle and high income as well. So what we see overall is that we have a nice representation of all of our students in all of our classes, you know, whether it's AP, dual credit, those higher level rigorous courses. You know, we want to make sure that we're having conversations with all students to make sure that they know that they are welcome in all of our classes. And then at the bottom, just participation in AP courses. So again, this is just kind of pointing towards that within all the AP courses that we have, you know, we see representation of all of our students when it comes to their race and ethnic background.
And, you know, certainly Jacqueline and Carrie jump in, or anybody, you know, jump in. We want to share some insight cards with you, because one of the things, if you ask, like, how has EOS helped? I think what EOS has really helped is it's really, really helped us individualize who is the person who can move up to more rigor, who can kind of, students who have done well attendance-wise, done well grade-wise, show promise. And these are individual cards. And, you know, we just ask all board members, you know, from Evelyn to like, these are real insight cards. So real students, real names on them. You know, if you could kind of keep this in the room, we try not to give people's data out, or, you know, there might be vulnerable things that students say. You know, can you, Mr. Beach, you want to walk us around what an insight card does? What this has allowed school counselors to do is really personalize the approach to students.
Yeah, so I'll start with that little bit of background. So all of our students, they receive their insight cards, and they receive them when they're meeting with their counselor when we enter the registration process. And this card, in many cases, kind of drives that process. So if you take a look at it, you know, you'll see things listed as far as, you know, career interests for students, their best way of learning, just in general. We'll see just overall interests, and towards the bottom, there's an opportunity for students to list barriers when it comes to taking AP or dual credit classes. And this is where the conversation can be really, you know, striking when it comes to counselors talking with their students or their caseload, because they can really navigate and kind of depict or pick apart those barriers. You know, what is keeping you from trying an AP course or a dual credit course? You know, what are your thoughts on this? What have you heard? What are you thinking? So in many cases, when students talk about this with their counselors, in this particular setting, if we're approaching registration, you know, those conversations can lead to those barriers coming down, and students really understanding what it means to be an AP student, what it means to take an AP class or a dual credit class. So it really helps set up that course registration process when kids are picking their classes for the upcoming school year. So conversation may be, hey, you know, you did really well in Math 2. You know, you had 2 A's for the whole school year. You know, your teacher said that you are definitely more than capable than kind of challenging yourself a little bit more. Have you thought about taking AP Pre-Calc AB? You know, the student may say, well, yeah, I've thought about that. I think that's the route I want to go. Or, no, I really didn't think about that. I didn't know that my teacher saw that in me. And it's like, well, yeah, you know, your teacher did. You know, your teacher did think that you are very capable of kind of moving to that next level. So the insight cards just kind of help drive that conversation. Another big part of this, on the left side, you'll see the words trusted adults. And this is where students can list just some of the adults that they're very close with and that they trust within our district, within the school building. And this has come helpful in many, many ways. Again, just kind of driving conversations about courses, but not just about courses. You know, we're looking at career interests. I do know within our dean's office, you know, some students that may have experienced, you know, a little bit of trouble or some setbacks, you know, they can connect with their trusted adult just to kind of get them back on track when it comes to behavior things. So we use this insight card for a lot of different things. It's been very valuable for us for the past 3 years now.
Mr. Beach, I have a quick question. I noted on this one that the trusted adult is listed as no one. What do you do in that situation when you have students who they don't either have study skill support either? What do you do for them to make
Yeah,
them
so
successful?
our once this data is put together and we see that, you know, our counselors, we follow up with the students, you know, just to get a sense of, you know, hey, we noticed that you didn't put a trusted adult down. Is there something more to that? And in some cases there is, you know, and typically we may hear the answer, you know, I just don't feel that connected to the school. And then that becomes, you know, well, why? And then two, what can we do to help you feel connected? So it really helps drive that conversation to get kids connected to the school and kind of get things turned around, whether it's socially or academically.
And there was a funny thing, Michaeline, I think it was a student named Ava Keys. I think it was Ava Keys who talked a lot about this, or Sophia Reyes, I can't remember which, but talked a lot about the call. They used the word the call. And what they meant was with these insight cards, when somebody, you know, brings you into a school counseling office and says, listen, you know, we see mine mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, you want to graduate a 4-year college. Wow, let's look at your grades, your attendance. You really look like you could move up to a more rigorous that's going to get you there quicker. And someone makes the call to you, invites you. You know, sometimes we find that there's no trusted adult because students have not received the call. This is the first time they've received the call, and that's really the power of this, is to specifically say, we think you can do more. And that has a powerful, powerful impact on students where, you know, someone noticed me and thinks I have more potential. I mean, who doesn't want to be told that? It's enjoyable. It's gratifying. And then you suddenly feel like, well, I probably owe it to this person to do this. And I don't know, Carrie, Jacqueline, if you want to weigh in, you've really led EOS work.
I would say that one of the other things that's probably not in this data report is the fact that our students who have been a part of AP are mentoring our new AP years, which is also a wonderful way for our students to understand, you know, the rigor of the course, but also have that, you know, peer support that is necessary. The trusted adult piece, again, like Mr. Beach said, is critical because that allows us to at any point in the conversation. So when we don't see that, we just try to find ways to make sure that every student is, you know, connected somehow, academically, socially, through our activities as well. And then the other piece that's really cool is the workshop piece. There are students who you study differently for different classes, and so it's important to note that we have these, you know, workshops that we also provide students to help them with executive function if they need it. You know, so there are things that we're doing, supportive measures to help them have success in these classes. So it's not just like we're throwing students into these rigorous classes without that support.
And I would say, you know, Bob called it the call.
Yes.
But it's the tap, you know, somebody's tapping these kids on the shoulder and saying, I believe in you. I believe in you. I think you can do this. You should challenge yourself. Anecdotally, my older daughter had to work hard for her grades. And I was trying to push her into some AP dual credit courses. And, you know, what do I know? I'm just her mom. Happens to be an educator. But it wasn't until her counselor said, I really think you could do this. And she comes home and says, they said that I could take these classes. And I just sat there and smiled and said, well, yes, we're going to take these classes. So it took somebody outside of, you know, the parents to tap a kid on and say, I believe.
So, you know, sometimes a parent doesn't understand necessarily what does that really mean to be in an AP class, and so we offer an opportunity to share what the experience is. You know, we went from 25 families in the previous year coming to our AP night to having over 100 families last year. So we're, you know, continuing to reach out to families and say, hey, we want your students to be a part of, you know, this type of rigor and come learn about how to get them there, how to support them.
How are students getting AP mentors?
So we have a program called, well, our mentors are called AP Advocates, and we actually just had one of our first meetings with all of our first-time AP takers that are sophomores. And this meeting kind of set up the establishment on how they can get, I guess, introduced to an AP advocate. So we'll have more meetings, and there will be opportunities for these students to connect with advocates during Compass, and potentially like during their study halls, just to give you examples. So there is, we have like a procedure that they can follow and see if they are in need of seeing an advocate.
So, I'm sorry, I have a sophomore in AP, and I'm trying to understand, like, when this meeting was. Is it during school? Is it after school? Was
Yeah.
it required for all of them?
So we met,
end up there?
it was last week during Compass. We had about 260 sophomores that met in the auditorium, just to kind of give the layout of, again, what it means to be AP, and then the steps that students can take to get introduced to an AP advocate. And then we'll be following up with those students as well.
And Robert, in the sophomore class, they were first time.
Correct. First time
There's
to
advanced
AP.
placement. Right. And that just kind of gives you an idea of the volume alone in the sophomore class of the new to it. Many students might end up in a freshman advanced placement class like human geography AP or computer science AP or an honors class just by their recommendations. You know, they might have started out that way. They're already in the glide path. What we found is it's the first time student who that rigor for the first time might be a shock to the system. So building that peer support around them.
How long have we had AP advocates?
That was my question.
We've had that, each year it's kind of been revamped to get better. But since we've had EOS, that's when the AP Advocates program kind of was established.
Yeah, it's
So
our
for the
third year.
3
working
years,
with-
yeah.
What's our third year?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And it was one of the strategies both the principals run sort of an implementation team. There's lots of different ways you can provide support, but AP Advocates came out of the peer support, right? When you see, you know, I mean, lots of lessons from the Bob McBride life. One time, one of my daughters, you guys know my daughters both Chinese, right? And my oldest daughter said to me, "Dad, why do they only have Asians at the dry cleaners and restaurants?" And we talked to our social worker about it, and she said to us, "Well, that's probably who you've exposed them to, because you can only have pride in your race when you see people of your race doing things that you're proud of," right? So we expanded the envelope of who Sophie and Annie McBride saw, right? Created a broader vista for them. So peer support, seeing other students like me stepping up for the first time, builds momentum, you know, that way. And that's been one of the things we found with our particular students is a real support. Any other, you know, we just want to be, you know, thanks, Lynn. I don't know if there's any other questions or any other sections here in advanced placement, and we also had dual credit in here.
Do you guys have like, for like those sophomore, first time AP students, do you have like mentors that they can rely on?
Yeah, those are the advocates.
advocates.
Those are their mentors right
Oh,
there.
the
That's
advocates
just,
are the same as.
correct, yeah.
We also have done quite a bit with the trusted adult. If we have an identified trusted adult, we try to point out to our trusted adults that you are named as a trusted adult. Here are the students that named you as a trusted adult. That creates an informal connection.
Correct.
Real quick question, about how many advocates do you have then?
Right now, we have close to 50.
Close to 50.
Close to
okay.
50,
And we had
yes.
200 new sophomores.
Yep. So
maybe-
that's where we have to kind of get creative as far as how we can make sure we reach all those sophomores.
Right, and the model is not, you know, if you're new, you get an advocate, because that might not work.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
ideally, the model is, and I would say the data here shows that our teachers do a phenomenal job. Outside of these systems, students are already having a high pass rate in these classes. You know, if we go to the dual credit side of things, that's another area where our teachers are really excelling. They've got to get certified by JJC, very, very specific requirements. You know, last May, out of 26 high schools, we're the top, top enrollment in dual credit, top college credit granting institution of those 26. And that is a little bit different. You know, we maybe overemphasize dual credit. There's a graph in here because dual credit must be accepted as a college transcript at every public university in Illinois for sure. But it's also, when you have a junior college transcript, most universities will take that credit at face in the country. So to be kind of the top out of 26 is another lane for students who might not be taking advanced placement.
Are we looking at, like we had the advanced placement night, to explain to the parents, this is what
We could.
placement, dual credit?
Yeah, we haven't had a specific dual credit night, but I think the word is out a little bit more on dual credit. We could always have a specific dual credit night. You know, our enrollment figures and our school counselors, and so many senior classes we populated. If you look, Luann, on page 14, if you look at the top, so many classes that you fall into, you just naturally fall into it. You know, if you look at those classes, so many of them, you know, are just many of the natural pathways that our students take.
Do students, they exclusively start dual credit their junior year, or is it only their senior year?
Whenever they're in the class. Some of these classes you can't get to until your senior year because there's prerequisites beforehand. Some of them you can take personal finance much earlier. The issue though is 7-period day here at East.
Correct.
So now students are going to have more pathways. They're going to have more openings to take more of these type of classes. So
I have a quick question too. When you're talking about these cards, the students fill these out every year, correct?
Yes.
And have you noticed an increase since you've had advocates for the students with AP classes, an increase in having trusted adults put on here as a stronger connection to the district as a whole?
I would say from my experience, yeah, I think the trusted adult concept has been explained a little bit better, so students really get a sense of what this means. But yes, I do feel since we started this 3 years ago to now, you do see a lot more of our students that will list at least one person as a trusted adult, if not more.
Okay, and more that you see after they get the call or the tap, so to speak, they definitely feel a connection. Okay.
and it's just, you know, I think everybody here, with the exception of Evelyn, you know, at this table, has worked with, and maybe Mr. Beach, I don't think you have teenagers, but you're almost there.
I'm getting there.
All right, you're almost there. You know, to get a teenager moving in a more challenging direction doesn't just take one request.
Right.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
really what we've
That
tried
was
to
my
deploy
question,
is school insight cards. So school counselors can be very strategic and specific in meetings with students. AP advocates, so now you have some sideways. Placing students in those classes, so now you have a lot of positive peer roles. Adding things like Compass, so you have access to your teachers. I think all of that together really has created a situation. I have not worked in an institution except for this one where we've added so many students, almost 800, and our pass rate went up by 10%. Generally, institutions have to get ready for a dip. That doesn't last forever, but not right away, you know, moving up. I think the skill of our teachers, and then I think all of the supports, people working in that direction, helped with that type of college rigor. You know, the idea that the board set in board goal number 1 in 2021 was that as many students, we set 100% by now, just as an aspirational goal, but as many students would leave with college experience as possible. They might not go to college, but we wanted to have that and many other doorways open for them. You know, so this data all kind of points in that direction.
Quick question, the
Yeah.
dual credit is not weighted, right? So those A, B, Cs are.
No, it's
They're
not. It's
straight up
not a
ABC.
weighted grade, right?
So,
And one reason why we've done that, Tammy, is access, right? If someone hasn't perceived to be in the honors pathway, and JJC doesn't do that. They don't. They say this is a college class.
well, yeah, it's
They're
for real.
agnostic of whether we call it weighted,
Yes,
basic. They're like, this is a college class.
right,
So we've sealed it that way.
right, okay.
And you know, the worry you get into is if you weight it, then you might lose students.
No, of
bless you.
course, because the AP
Yeah.
classes then they're not college level classes, are they, or are they?
They are college level classes, but because they're not affiliated with a specific
Specific, okay.
institution, you don't automatically get a college transcript. Right.
Okay.
I just have one quick comment from a parent who's had 2 kids in AP courses. I think that that meeting that you do at the beginning of the year where you have, you go to different stations, and one of them is the AP, where you've got students in there talking about their experiences. I can tell you from my daughter, where that program wasn't in place at the time, to where my son did. As a parent, I understood more about what was taking place in an AP class. And then it also reassured my student that he could actually do it, because you had students who were very open about how they had to manage their time. Some were taking 4 AP classes and they were doing extracurricular. And I just felt that was a really, I just thought that was a really great improvement. It helped, I think, the understanding and gave students the confidence to say, okay, if I was hesitant because I didn't know what it was about, that, well, they're taking 4 and they say they can handle it, and that type of thing. So I just thought that was a really good improvement, because when I was a parent with my daughter at the time, I didn't know as much. So I thought I was pleased for that. I think it helps a lot.
We okay to move to section 3? Is that all right? Dr. Huntington, you want to come on in? And, Abby's got a mic, but you might want to jump on there. And you can hang out, Mr. Beach. You don't have to, unless you want to make way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for doing that. And the spotlight page we had here for this section is page 22 and 23. Of course, I'll maybe go back and have us page through all of them, but just this section is really devoted to kind of a third prong of college and career readiness. The first 2 prongs that the board set were advanced placement and dual credit. And then the third prong was really getting our students as much employment experience as we can get. We're trying to do it all over the place. Jobs that we do at a district, if you go across the hallway, the receptionists at the CWC will be students, student custodians, student technology assistance center workers, L-Town grounds. So this whole section, this also corresponds to the board's goal of 40 hours of community service. So all of the research that when students are active, they're working, they're interacting with adults, the 2 number 1 things that most colleges will say that predict independence in a 2-year or 4-year college. 1, when you were growing up, did you have a roommate? Like a brother, a sister or brother, right? You learn to live with a sibling. Number 2, did you work any kind of part-time job at any place? Directly relate to the independence you need when you're off in the military, you're off at a Joliet Junior College or in a 4-year college. You want to tell us a little bit about 22, 23?
Absolutely.
Dr.
This is
Huntington?
my proudest moment, I think, as an employee here, Dr. McBride, I have to tell you. One of the biggest things about making sure that we're graduating children with disabilities who can live independently or with some limited support is something to be vastly proud of. I know the numbers sometimes seem small, but the impact is very large. So I first want to start out by looking at our DRS outcomes. This is for students who need vocational rehab services. They need specialized support and skills in order to obtain competitive employment after they graduate or even while they're in school with us. We have the highest DRS contract, I think, in all of the south suburbs, and I know we're rivaling a lot of other programs in the state. I would almost put us up against every other school district with a DRS contract. We are killing it. And by we, I mean our students. They are getting the skills, they are learning what they need to learn, and they're taking those skills and getting competitive employment. Why does that matter? Well, for us, we know that our students don't really leave here, right? Kids come back, they live here in this community, they stay in this community. You will always make more money working than you will receiving governmental assistance and services. You may need to get Social Security benefits if you are an adult disabled person who has some more needs. But if you can also obtain employment, you will also take less money, and probably make more money as an outcome. And I'm also speaking not in terms of just an administrator, but with my own 20-year-old, how much of a difference in his life with his 12 hours a week of competitive employment at Jewel, that everybody worked really hard to help him secure that employment. It makes a huge difference, not only in the life of the student, but also in the life of our family. That kid is not nickel and diming me to death anymore. He's got his own little money to take care of the things he wants to buy. So we want to make sure that we're providing those things for our families as well. In addition, we have a program that is a self-contained program for students that have some social emotional needs, our Lockport Academy. We have, with the generous allowance of the school board, have hired career facilitator that works directly in the academy every day with those students to assist them in getting employment and keeping employment. Because sometimes it's easy to get a job, but sometimes it's really hard to keep a job. And so we have found that our students at the Lockport Academy are graduating, and they have post-secondary plans, and they're following through on those. Some of our students are going to JJC and getting into programs there. Some of our students are going to trade school, and they are getting into trade school. They have to take the test. They have to do everything else that everybody else needs to do, and they're getting enrollment in those trade school programs. We have had students that have gone into the military, which I just got a call from somebody that one of our former students is working on an aircraft carrier, a Navy, right? And he works in the kitchen there, and he's doing amazing, right? And I thought to myself, really, all those rules? He's doing it, right? Because he learned the skills that he needed to learn in order to be successful. And his mom, boy, when she called Erica to tell her about him, Erica called me immediately after getting off the phone how excited she was for that student and that family. And then finally, one thing that I know you're all scared for, because I was a little bit nervous too. Driving is probably one of the most essential skills for our students to be able to master and to master safely, obviously. In years past, typically students with cognitive impairments didn't necessarily obtain driver's license. It's pretty scary, right? There's a lot of decision-making that needs to happen. There's a lot of information that you need to learn. And for some of our students, they may never drive. But I don't know what we did, but I do know what we did. We worked really hard. We had a driver's education teacher and one of our modified teachers. We did a very intensive driver ed class, and we were able to have students take that course last year, or at the second semester of last year. FYI, we're probably going to run it again next year because it was wildly successful. But we have students that have obtained their driver's licenses, are driving, or have permits and are working on that, or even just pass the permit test. So they might not drive, but having those skills and being able to say, I passed the driver's test is a big deal. And it does lead to better outcomes for students. My son doesn't drive, so he relies on myself or my husband to get him to and from work. We have some resources. If he needs to, he could do rideshare. Not everybody will have that kind of resource, so being able to drive, especially in the suburban area where there's not a lot of bus routes, is a really important skill that I'm super proud that we were able to support some of our families and some of our students who really wanted to drive to obtain their driver's license. So those are my highlights.
Yeah, and let's take a pause, this whole section. We've got our, Angela Adolph works quite a bit on page 20 with our internships and with employment here at school. Then Wilco, many of you know about Wilco. Wilco is probably the fastest growing program next to dual credit and advanced placement, just because, and again, an 8-period day is going to open up new possibilities for it next year. Students are seeing from people who want to go to a direct admit program in nursing. Many of those direct admit programs require you to be a CNA. The ones that are not direct admit, you show up on their campus, they'll tell you have to get a CNA before your junior year getting into the program. People are flocking to that in all the things: architecture, construction management, welding, veterinarian, technician, EMT, you name it. This is just expanding at such a rapid rate. Students are seeing that Not every traditional path is the path. So. Section 3, any questions just about work experience, internships, expanded programs?
I just wanted to comment. I think that this section was my favorite. Not because I don't love the data and seeing the grades and things like that, but I do really enjoy seeing the opportunity that the students are provided for the real life experience. And I do believe that is where the career and college readiness really stems from, giving them the opportunity, but also giving them the support. And I see that through, my undergrad was in rehabilitation services. So
okay.
when I see the numbers here, these are big numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
They are, and it's amazing. And the amount of support that these students provided is incredible. It's fantastic. I really enjoy seeing it.
Do you think that the Illinois State Education, Board of Education will modify some of their rules about, the people who had to go an extra year?
I don't think so. We'll still have 18 and 23-year-olds.
I know we will have them, but will they not
You mean-
count that against them?
Oh, they're not. This is the last year that was happening.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, that has finally been done.
10 years
Mm,
of
thank you.
advocacy.
You can't even, as a principal, as a superintendent, directors, assistant superintendents, we've just said, this makes no sense. Why would you count these students as non-grads, right? And so this is it. This is the last fall that you'll see that.
Okay, good.
Nonsensical, right? Do you mind, and you have to slow me down if there's a page you really want to, but section 4 is fairly, we're going to dive into section 5. I don't want to fly by it, but I want to build on what Michaeline said. Actually, the state, when it pulls on, eventually, it's going to pull on into the CCRI index, involvement outside of school. And we just thought we wanted to compile what's going on with community service, where our students, that's a local goal, a local graduation requirement that you've set. You can just see, as of 9/15/2025, where everybody is, right? And students are moving quickly towards their 40 hours. There's a lot in here, eventually participation in activities and athletics are going to make its appearance on the Illinois School Report Card. But I thought one graphic that we put in here was fairly significant. It's on page 26 in the upper right-hand corner. This really tells you quite a bit. So you have athletics and activities. You have 1,694 students who have a 3.6. Those students, that many involved, 2,259 involved in athletics annually have a 3.9 GPA. That direct correlation that the more you're involved in school, the more you tend to perform. You feel that connection. That's really a tribute to, you see all the clubs and activities that we offer, some of the accomplishments we had last year, some of the brags for our district. I would, I think Dr. Johnson and I would call out Vocal Point, right? You see these students who just seem like everyday students like Evelyn walking around. You go to Broadway, you see them on a Broadway stage with the 10 best programs in the country, and suddenly they seem like they're much older and way more talented, and then they come off the stage and they're sophomores again. And I just think performance tells you when someone can perform under pressure in the thing that they've studied, that really shows a very high level of learning that sometimes we just discount. So whether it's athletics, that's dance, that's, a sport, but there's a lot of pressure to compete. When you can compete at the highest levels, it just tells you. We had a young lady who was the top vocalist, right, for that whole competition. So Porter's going out and doing great things. Are we okay to move on to ACT? Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Kelly Featherling's going to join us. And we have gifts for you. We have interactive things for you. And I am apologetic. I can't tell you very much about what's going to appear on the Illinois State Report Card. You'll see that proficiency levels go up. You'll see the growth that we have. But what we want to do is give you a section And just have each board member get a section so
no,
you
this is
can,
new.
you can see, you know, if you were sitting down and you were taking a test, maybe you're gonna get the reading section or the English section or the math section. Evelyn loves this. She just wishes she could do this all day long, right? But you've excelled, right? You know, feel pretty good about this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And, you know, I'd invite Kelly Featherling, and also you should really give her a big round of applause. Straight from the classroom, an excellent classroom teacher. Kelly's done a lot of things, being an AP coordinator for us, a lot of steps, and this year making the step into being a full-time assessment coordinator. And and like I said, all of the data in front of you is really her responsibility. Evelyn, we're not gonna make you take that. Yeah, thanks. So before we get into the data, and I have Dr. Cristofaro and Mrs. Featherling highlighted, I don't know what sections you have, but I just want to make a few mentions as you look at it. And then I'll maybe have Mrs. Featherling explain the skills. It is very important that we all, I always say everyone should understand what accountability testing looks like. So for example, you probably are familiar with something called No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was a seminal 2001 federal legislation. What it required was that it required two things. All states had to break their student populations up into what are called subgroups: race, special ed, low income, and look at performance based on those subgroups. This is under the second George Bush. Then the second thing it required was that every state had to come up with a state accountability test. And the federal government required that, but that state accountability test could only test reading and math. Move forward, the Obama administration did a revision of No Child Left Behind when it was reauthorized, called ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, turned more over to the state, but still required that every state declare what its accountability test is. Most states in the union use a criteria reference test like the TAKS test. The TAKS test is related directly to what students in Texas learned in their classes. It's directly related to the state mandated units of study. A few states like Colorado and Illinois selected a college entrance exam, the ACT or the SAT. And that's just particularly where we were. We had the ACT, then the state went to the SAT, we're back to the ACT now. The reason why this is important is a norm reference test, its degree of difficulty is changed every year. So the ACT, its product is not meaningful to colleges if it doesn't have a high score and a low score. If it doesn't have a high score and a low score, then how can a college use it for admissions purposes? So every year, test takers take the test. There's a renorming that takes place. There's a degree of difficulty that's increased. So it's sometimes hard to compare year to year, although we'll see growth because Evelyn's ACT was more difficult than the ACT of test takers the previous year. So it'll always get this score spread. That's basically, and a norm reference test is comparing Evelyn not to her peers here at Lockport, but Evelyn to everyone in the state and Evelyn to everyone in the country. So let me just pause there as a preface. What are you seeing? Because in a norm reference test, there's a couple of things. There's a degree of difficulty, but there's another in assessment, what we call a cognitive load that's put on students, and that's time. I would just ask everyone, can you look at the top and see how much time you have? What you're being asked to do? If I remember correctly, reading is 40 minutes. You might not have it. You'll have some directions at the top. And it's worth just looking at the directions. What are you being asked to do? And usually in 35 or 40 minutes. Oh, they have to do Oh, you guys have a dual credit
Yeah.
test, right? AP and dual credit, just these kind of tests. Reading, I believe, is 40 minutes. I can't remember. 40 minutes, right? And I believe it's 35 items, if I remember correctly. So just to kind of get the speed, if you have 40 minutes and 35 items, how much time do you have per item? Right? Just a tick over a minute per item, right? And then I always invite people to look at the passages, the density of passages, and really think about, you know, what are you being asked to do? ACT more so than the SAT. English is really a grammar test. Conventions scored very well on that. Math really requires algebra, geometry, and advanced algebra. A little bit of difficulty, I think integrated math is really strong. It's internationally how math is taught. But all these years later, after No Child Left Behind in Common Core, we still have a test that values topical math. Science, does anybody have the science section?
I do.
What is, just first glance, Candace, what is science really testing? If you page through it.
It seems reading for content.
Right, science is really a reading test. It really is a disguised reading graphs and reading, you know, text. And then, who's got the reading section?
I think that's me. I
Yeah,
think
what-
this is reading.
Yeah, what do you think, Tammy, if you had to do well on that, what skill do you need to really excel?
Yeah, it's kind of like inference. You have to decide what it's telling you. I mean, it's giving some facts, but the questions are an inference. I mean, more than one person could come across this differently.
Right, you can't, if you look at the questions,
Yeah.
the answer is not in the passage. The answer is in the inference. You have to put lots of things together to make that inference, right? Because it's not like the question goes to this paragraph, oh, I found the answer. None of the questions do that. All of the questions either have drawing a conclusion or an inference. So it's just good to know, okay, what are these different things before we kind of get into the results? You know, just wanted to have you a sample in front of you before I have Kelly and Lori jump into the results. Do you want to jump in? And we were going to really spotlight page 31, 32. So, you know, maybe if we look at 31, 32, this was really an incredible thing. I was so amazed Kelly Featherling added this. I'm going to have her explain. These are called frequency tables, and I'll just stop there and have her explain why they're so important on something like the ACT.
Okay, so that kind of goes along with what I passed out, the two papers. So I was, you know, a classroom teacher for 15 years at Spanish, and then moving into this position, this was kind of the first thing I started with. And as a Spanish teacher, you know, my students would but we were always trying to show them how the skills they were learning in world language were going to connect to this. So I jumped when I was going through the whole website and downloading all the different data points, I really liked the frequency distribution. That's what I would do with my own classes, is look at where are the largest bands of students falling against the average. So with our composite being 30, with our composite being 19.9, or just call it 20, then I looked at, okay, well, where are the largest groups, or what ACT calls score bands, where are the largest groups of students falling above and below that composite? So what you have in front of you then is what ACT provides in terms of kind of showing like what can a student in that band do, and then you can see right below it as it continues, what do they need to be able to do to move along the continuum. So especially if we're talking about test prep classes or kids taking prep classes outside of school, besides just taking ACTs over and over again, you know, what actively can teachers do intentionally in their classrooms to move kids along? So I chose, for reading, I chose the if you look at the one that says ACT content standards for reading, and the page 1 is sort of where it says score range 13 to 15. I chose key ideas and details with the content substandard of close reading being kind of the most universal skill. Like we said in science, it's mostly reading. So you can see a student, like for our reading, our highest band, I guess, is at a 21. But if you look at 14 or 17, we can see that a student scoring in a 14 can locate basic facts. They can draw simple logical conclusions about main characters in somewhat challenging literary narratives. So you'll get reading passages that are literary, that have characters, or they could be excerpts from things. There are nonfiction, like informational texts. There are paired passages, which is something I kind of, when we get through the testing season this fall, I really want to work with English teachers on is giving them, when you have two, that might be the one that you have. I don't know if I gave you that one, but those are very challenging, where they have to go between two different passages and make arguments and draw conclusions, not just from one point, but against the two. And so if you look at the next band, then if we want to move a kid from a 14 to the 16 to 19 range, they have to do those things that they were doing previously, but also now locate simple details within the sentence in a somewhat challenging passage. So you can kind of see, like, it's the same skill every time, but a student, if you flip, it goes to the 28 to 32 range. What is a student scoring at a 28 doing differently than a student who is scoring at a 14? And it's the same skill, it's just the depth at which they could do it. So we've been talking a lot about drilling down to the specific skill instead of having a kid come into a Compass and saying, all right, what do you want to work on? Being able to identify specifically locating important details in complex passages. So that's one, requiring that the passages be complex, which we have some data on that too. You know, we've been talking since the beginning of this meeting about, you know, being intentional about the passages that we're choosing. But my goal when I dug into this, or the question I had was, well, what do those questions look like? What do passages on the ACT actually look like? So that is something I want to kind of gather for the teachers, get my hands on as many tests as I can. You know, ACT does put out some practice ones, but when students take them on Saturdays, there are certain test dates where they'll offer the test back. So I found a kid who took it last Saturday. I told him, as soon as you get that test, email it to me. But just giving teachers the tools, you know, the text types, and then showing them that this is specifically spelling out what a student has to be able to do to move along. So by having these frequency bands, you can even, on this website, you can click that blue line, you can click it and it will disaggregate the exact student. So even if a teacher wanted to see specifically, you know, how a particular group of kids were doing from a class period, they could do that too. But I kind of seeing that as my new role too, is how much can I help the teachers out with this piece of it, so that they're not feeling like they're sacrificing content to, you know, can we kill two birds with one stone? Can we continue to kind of test prep while keeping the same content plans that you would have? Bless you. Thank you.
And on November 4th, we'll have a whole group of sophomores and juniors who will take practice ACT, will have these frequency distributions. So think about it, how that'll allow us to advise their teachers, but also advise their course selection for next year. Courses that will address some of the areas that they need. And you know, if you look, proficiency, you'll see a jump on the ACT from the SAT in proficiency. You'll see that next month when I can unveil the Illinois School Report Card. But really what it gets down to is where you see those red boxes, it's pushing those students up. Those are the students who have the highest frequency, have the greatest needs. That doesn't mean you ignore other students, but generally the students lower on the graph than them are performing higher. The students higher than them are receiving a ton of services already. But it's students right in those bands that really are our focus. And if you kind of, your eye goes over to page 33, one of the things we've highlighted is complex reading proficiency. I don't know, you know, Laura, you look like you wanted to make a mention on this. This really is the number one thing, you know, I think lots of successes, but an area where we have real work to do is where we started tonight. Of doing complex reading proficiency, because it touches on so many pieces. You'll see this poster in most of our classrooms, I hope all of our classrooms, but this test doesn't test dates, time, places, definitions. It tests generalizable skills. And if you don't know what those skills are, I feel like a very successful teacher, because whenever I have a student embrace the language, like my heart was aflutter when Tammy used inference, right? But if students know, like they have to infer, she said, you have to infer here. If a student knows what she or he has to do, they're going to be far more successful. So they test, can you recognize a claim? What part of the, you know, reading is evidence? How can you do an analysis, break this apart, now put it back together with some reasoning, synthesize what seems like different, you know, information, put it into one idea as an inference, understand, oh, there's a context here for this. Is this science? Is this social studies? What context am I in here? So, you know, using that language with students so they know what they're being asked to do. You're going to make a mention about complex reading proficiency.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we gave, sample ACT tests over here so you could really see what students were being asked to do and see how it connects to our common academic language. But hopefully over here you see that too. I think you saw probably some intense vocabulary where students were having to apply it and go all the way to a synthesis level depending on where the testing was. So teachers were really protective of the material, so I'll probably have to grab those back. I just wanted to follow up on what Dr. McBride said about these bands, because we can look and see where the students, is there a course the student is taking? And so really looking at the composite, if I went back to the students' freshman year in the 13 and 14, we don't see a lot of social studies classes being taken, right? So that was one place where we knew we could level up. Conversely, and this is why it's so interesting to have Mrs. Featherling in her new role. She also pulled the 25 on the composite band because that was the next of the three bands. And guess what we saw there? We saw a lot of students in their junior year taking physics. It was like physics, right? When we went to the other score bands, we saw kind of a lot of different science classes, right? So that tells us something about the physics, the biochem physics message that we were talking about earlier tonight. When we can get students in those classrooms, they're probably having better experiences on holistically, but certainly on a rigorous test like this. I just also want to thank the board, Dr. McBride, for shifting the role of our assessment coordinator. Doris Fleckenstein was fantastic, amazing, but she was not a teacher by trade. And Kelly is a teacher by trade. And a very skilled teacher as well. You could hear it just from her explanations to you and the examples she chose to bring. Kelly, on our first Institute Day, did a session with our teachers that was optional. It was overwhelmingly attended because our teachers care and they want to figure out what can they do to help students prepare for this test. The things that are on page 33, the different categories there, you can see Kelly has met with department chairs and she has met with some teacher teams to try and help them understand what small shifts can you make in your classroom, what can you expose your students to help them have greater opportunity on these tests. And again, after November 4th, not only will she do that for our teachers, but on Lockport Planning Council, which is our regular meeting with our sender districts, their directors of curriculum and their principals, they are very interested in what we learned from the pre-ACT testing that Kelly has been doing with Jason Osbolt at our sender schools to get us some data, both for when Dr. Green gets these students and what can she learn about the ACT and what we need to do with the freshman student, but they also want to learn so that they can, they still have students for 6 more months. And, I hear Mrs. O'Halloran might say something different about the IAR. It's really a good, they say it's a very good test for telling you where students are at, but it might not tell you all the levels that you need to know, so.
I escaped IAR by a year.
Oh.
So I know. But I can find out.
No, well, they just,
Yeah.
when we were talking, and Dr. McBride talked about the Accelerated Placement Act, we really partner with our sender districts, like what can we do with the IAR? Again, they said it's fantastic at really knowing where students are. And just as the pre-K through 8 districts, just like we want to know, what is it that we need to do that we're not doing to help students be more successful?
I think I have an answer on that.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at, this is my area of greatest concern that in this report that I would report to you, because part of this is celebrating successes where students have, defied the odds and done amazing things. But just, it's also being, realistic and saying, wait a second here, there's things that we need to work on, that we can work on, that if we worked in a more unified fashion, I think can be a lever to real success. So if you look at the bottom of 31, my entire career as superintendent, Mrs. Johnson is reminding me that she does not like she wants to be way better than the state, which has always been, I agree with her. But when we saw this graph, bless you, when we saw this graph, this was a concern. This is right at the bottom, levels of proficiency in understanding complex text. And there's a definition there of complex text. This was somewhat eye-popping to me because as measured on this test, we have 54% of our students are approaching proficiency, 29 are at proficiency, and 17 are exceeding proficiency. Now, we are beating the state of Illinois, right? But, that 54%, yeah, right, I know. That 54% is really a stark number. And what that tells me is, the things on the poster, the small reading activity that I did with you to start this out, that kind of aggregate work in every single discipline can have a huge impact on the test materials that you see in front of you. Now, does the ACT measure everything? Is it the most important thing? Well, I wouldn't say that because I started out by saying multiple measures matter. But I would also say it doesn't tell you nothing. And performance on it tells us a number of things. It tells us, do students recognize different, when they're being asked to enact a different cognitive skill? Do they understand that? Oh, I'm being asked to infer. I'm being asked to draw a conclusion. I'm being asked to reason or synthesize. If you know what you're being asked to do, you generally can do it. Can they perform academically under time? It separates students out a lot, right? But, that pressure sometimes really tests your skill. How sharp is your skill? And so working in this area on complex reading proficiency, I think is really now that we're in the ACT, my goal would be for the district to really push our growth. I think we can attain excellent growth in both reading and mathematics. But I think we have to dig in from classroom observations, not a criticism of our teachers at all. This is a typical area. A lot of times in high school, we know kids can read, they're at reading proficiency, but we're giving them increasingly hard texts. And if we're not specific about how you read those increasingly hard texts and have that text in front of them, it's difficult for them to get to that skill level. Because when you go up, just take a middle school textbook and put it next to a high school textbook. Put a high school textbook next to a college textbook. You can do weights with those college textbooks, right? You can work out. They're so heavy. And it just shows you that the complexity keeps going up. Sometimes what we don't do is teach specifically to the complexity, right? I always say to teachers, if you assume the student read and you just assume everybody read, so we'll just get into this thing, they might have read, but they might not have the skill to summarize and then infer or synthesize. And it really helps if you model that with this really complex material. And that's what I would say, I think we need to work on the most. It's not that kids can't read, they can read.
Yeah.
But complexity is so important. And why is complexity important? Kids are actually reading more than they used to. And a lot of what they read is complex. And they're doing a lot of inferring because half of the acronyms on texting, I don't know. Do you know what they mean? Evelyn, you know what they mean. What is 6-7? Who knows,
Oh,
right? That's a big
Jesus.
inference, right? But they're actually reading more than they have ever read before. And they're actually inferring at a faster rate probably than they ever, but when we port it over school, we don't call it that. So.
The other piece too with the ACT as opposed to like an AP exam is just the spontaneity of what they're reading about. Like I
Right.
remember my ACT passages and having no schema.
Right.
And there's
Right.
that piece too. At least in AP US history, you have an idea. You've been coached on what to expect and how to respond and include these words. And with ACT, it's like I said, literary, fiction and all kinds of different text types. So it's regardless of the text type, can you do these things? So the other thing, really fast, the skill enhancement for reading, they do provide then for teachers, okay, what can you do in the classroom? So the other side is way bigger. The boxes were smaller, but in a 20 to 32 range, asking students to identify facts or details embedded in complex text. So, it does kind of spell out specifically what to do, but when we do our pre-test next week, we will then get to keep, not the booklets, we're doing it online, but they'll send us a digital copy of the test. We'll be able to see how the items broke down. We'll be able to see what questions are field test items. Actually, that's going to be in the spring, but field test items are another added piece to this, where those are ACT testing out questions to use on potential exams. So they do not count towards your score, but the students, when they're taking it, don't know which one to count. So I know, yeah.
And it adds, to the
it
test,
adds
it
a
adds
whole-
extraneous load.
There
right?
used to be at the end, and the proctor would tell the students, okay, these these questions don't count. They're just kind of like practice ones. They might use them in the future. And so students hear like, oh, these don't count, whatever. They would just respond whatever. Well, now they're hidden within the test. So that reading, there are 9 field test items, which is almost an entire passage. So there will be some prep there for the teachers too of the more the tests come out, like the more I get my hands on these to tell them it's never going to be the first and it's never going to be the last. That's what they say. So we'll see. But there's just a lot of factors that make it different from dual credit or AP as well.
I do want to do one last thing just to preview. It's the very, very back pages. Just when the Illinois School Report Card comes out, if you look in the lower left-hand corner where you see the word high school, there is sort of a score. When we did get our designation today, but when we get what's called our designation or our rating, this is how you're scored. So the ACT items that we just mentioned, ELA counts for 7.5%, math on the ACT 7.5%, science on the ACT 5%. Graduation now counts for 50%. That's why I pursued so much that metric. And then your English language learners, their performance counts 5% as well. And then chronic absenteeism, that counts now for 10%. If our students miss 5 days of school, they're chronically absent. Both of our student board members last year were chronically absent because they were going on college visits. I stood in front with one of them, Avery Colella, who was her 3rd time being downstate with the state superintendent. I stood with the state superintendent and said, you do know that this young woman who you've invited to all of these things is chronically absent and you've contributed to it.
Did they
Right.
realize it?
We had a good laugh. I think he knows what maybe needs some rethinking. Climate survey, we've done the 5 essentials and panorama. And then 9th graders on track, 8.33%. Then you can see there's going to be 2 other additional factors that are going to come online. There's college and career readiness index. We're wanting to prepare, and then fine arts also. So, is there anyone in the room that something you were dying to look at that we didn't give you the state of the state, something you want to explore, jump into?
I
Yeah,
just have a
Michaeline.
question. Lori, help me remember, what was the name of the tutoring service that you used last year?
We're still using it this year, Varsity Tutors.
Varsity Tutor, thank you, I could not think of it. You're still using it this year?
Yeah, they
Okay.
did a sequence with students taking the PSAT and MSQT. And then Mr. Beach will be working with students second semester to provide for some students to do some tutoring to get ready for the ACT.
Okay, and I know last year it was only available to juniors. Is it
Yes.
also only available to juniors, or is it spread out to sophomores?
It's still just juniors
Okay.
because technically it's still a pilot, I would say, and I
Okay,
think I
okay.
told you guys this at the committee. If I didn't, I apologize. That because we didn't do they have research based, like how much time you needed, and we did not do the amount of time. So we're piloting again. For the students who were working in the morning they worked on Wednesday morning. Mr. Beach and his team did a great job getting kids signed up. But it's an hour of time. So again, we're monitoring that.
Okay.
Right now, like, are the students showing up and engaging in the tutoring when we're home? And he's having some good, really positive data, right?
Right,
Because the
okay.
students want to do it, the parents are engaged, making sure the students are getting online. He even has had students contact him like, I'm sick today, I can't be online. And so he knows, and the Varsity Tutors reports to us. Is that a great model for us to use with another group of students for the ACT? Or should we be offering students 2 days a week during Compass?
Okay.
And you all know in here how much everybody loves Compass and
I
how
know.
valuable it is. So that's why we were like, we're gonna monitor this to see how we can do it. We also have 2 special education teachers who are case managers for juniors, and they have also already started
Wonderful.
working with Varsity Tutors in their classroom to tutor students.
Okay, how many students are participating in the pilot this year?
What's the number off the top of your head for PSAT?
So for the PSAT, we had 60 students take part in that program, and then with our special ed classes, we have third teacher that's doing that this year, for a total of about 20 students between the 3 classes that we're doing.
Wonderful, thank you.
And so we're hoping to hit 120 here second semester, helping kids get ready for the ACT.
Awesome. Well, I
And
hope it
then-
goes well.
Yeah, then institutionalize it with test-taking skills, which you approved tonight. You know, using this data and on those frequency charts, that will give us a really good list on November 4th of who should be taking test-taking skills next year.
Right.
And then approving an 8-period day, opening the day up so that they have pathways without completely ruining their schedule.
So I have 2 questions. Compass is how long? It's
35.
35 minutes,
35, okay.
4 days a week.
And then my other question is, what do you think the fine arts is gonna be in the next, is it gonna be like a percentage of how
I
many
don't know
kids are
what
enrolled?
percent. It's really ill-defined. You know, here's what I think they're going to include. Yeah, it's a really good question, Amy. Oddly enough, this is a misnomer, but I think they're going to include a couple of different things in fine arts. One, traditional, you know, art, music, participation in anything extracurricularly that would be art or music. And I think they're going to roll world language in there because of the world language 2-year requirement. Now, world language is not a fine art.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, world language can count as sort of in that fine arts zone. But they are going to require 2 years of fine arts, of world language. That doesn't seem to be going anyplace. And so I think that might come in under that umbrella as sort of like, it might get refined to humanities.
Okay.
The reason why you see that is an equity issue in the state, a perception by legislators that some communities like ours, there's a rich access to the fine arts. And the direct correlation between learning a world language, you know, speaking, playing a musical instrument or singing, you know, having, you know, artistic sensibility here, aplenty. Other communities, not so much. And so really trying to level that in the state. I don't think it'll come in as a high percentage,
Okay,
right?
I didn't think so, but I was kind of curious.
I think that the report definitely highlighted for me what we're doing very well with our very high kids. And it also highlighted where we're meeting maybe even at our lowest area. I don't know that the report for me highlighted enough of what we do for our average kids. And that was some of what, like, I know about the plus classes. I know you've mentioned them. And I know that we are doing things. And I know that there are kids that are enrolled in those programs. I guess that would be something that I would be looking for. I know even Compass is a component that helps that more that average, that middle to struggling low. It is, especially when I think about on page, sorry, I was thinking about page 31, where we were, I know this is separate, but where it was talking about the complex text and then the benchmarks, that obviously we have room for growth, and that's where we need, those are our kids, that a huge chunk that we need to target. I guess that's something that I'd like to see, because I know that we're doing some things, and then maybe there are things that I don't know about.
Could I give you 3 places to look, Wendy?
Okay.
The first place is in grade distribution.
Okay.
That's every student.
Right.
And not only exceptional learners are holding up that strong, like almost 9-year performance. So that's a metric, like if you're on page 5, that really reflects, the strong performance of all students, regardless of level. The other thing I'd really look at is the students who are new to advanced placement, the almost 800, and the students who are really knocking it out in dual credit, those are all average students, what we would previously call average. So those interventions are average student interventions. So that, I would say, almost with all due respect, almost the opposite of what you're saying. Those are 2 huge initiatives for average students, and average students getting attention they never got from the institution previously. We just knew more. We were able to say, hey, can we do this thing? The insight cards are all about, like, every single one of you got an insight card. These are what were previously called average students, just run-of-the-mill students, just taking regular level courses. But the minute they started earning A's and B's in regular level classes, we said, hey, you're an air quotes average student, whatever that means in this day and age. We want to pull you into these more rigorous classes. So those are large numbers, 800, and then on the dual credit side, those are all average students. So that might not be as obvious in the data, but if I was making an argument, this whole booklet is about average students. Is that resonating?
I hear what you're saying. Maybe I'm not communicating.
And can I,
What I'm looking for.
here's just why I want to stick a pin in it. I want to challenge it, because so often when people look at this, people do say that this is for the top students. I would caution the board vigorously saying that. It's a disservice to average students to say that. These accomplishments are average students. And you're charged with being the spokespeople in the district. And if you walk out of this room and say, well, this report that we're really going to send out to the public is really about top-notch students, not about the average student, I would probably say it's the most amount of damage you could do to our average students. And it's sort of damaging to really what's happening academically, because it kind of plays into a trope that people oftentimes use. They oftentimes say that, well, those classes are only for the top kids. And when we see, air quotes, average kids exceed in the top places, we should shine the spotlight on that, right? I think it's so, 40 years of public education have really made me believe this, that if we as a group don't say that, then nobody will say that for those children. So I just want to push back a little bit, like, this is about average kids. It is not about the extraordinary kids. The gains are, we could not have gotten these gains if they were just the, you know, the top kids, right? And if we want to dig in more, I could show you different places. But I think for you as a public official, it's so important to point that direction. Because we have a lot of kids who, man, 800 kids who we talked into for the first time taking the hardest high school classes they'll ever take.
I don't think anybody's questioning whether or not
Yeah.
we're pushing kids into taking these opportunities that are in front of them. I think that what ends up happening is when we're in the community and we have to answer to people, it's that other number, right? The one where Ms. Johnson was talking about, she wants to see our proficiency scores a lot higher than the state of Illinois. Those numbers, those resonate to our citizens and worries them, you know?
Yeah, why are they worrisome?
Because they think they should be higher.
Okay, let's keep going.
If we have so many, I mean, I can understand where she's coming from.
Mhm.
You know, we have we have 800 new kids in AP.
Right.
Why are we
That is a-
graduating 97% of our kids who, when we look at their reading proficiencies, they're at 52%?
Right, that is a really good question.
Yeah.
And this is their complex reading proficiency. So this is a very narrow band, and it doesn't mean it's where they're approaching, right? So here's the caution. I would really caution you to use a single measure.
Okay.
Because if you're saying the ACT is the most important thing in all of the things in this book,
It's not.
then I think as a board, you need to sit down, you need to refashion that's a big decision. I mean, it's a big decision, right? If you want to make ACT your number one driver, I would, with all due respect, say to board members, you have to explain all the measures. Advanced placement, you have a dual credit test. That's a super good question, Tammy. How can they do well on an advanced placement test and a JJC test and then struggle? Last year, we did a really interesting thing. We didn't do it this year, where we took a group of students who had high GPA, high advanced placement score, high dual credit test score, and yet did not meet SAT. Well, the answer is it's a norm reference test. It's a very different type of test. It's a single day test that's designed to always get a high and always get a low. It always will, no matter what. And it'll be more difficult every single year, year after year. So in my humble opinion, it doesn't mean you shouldn't work on those areas like complex reading proficiency. We've got to get at that. And you'd be surprised, Wendy, that area, your number one student in the class sometimes struggles with that. But I would not say that single measure is that is a misnomer. You know, I always say when citizens say, oh, well, that's the most important thing, I always say our kids are more than a number. You know, because what we do is when we buy into that narrative, we dismiss all of their other accomplishments. And I think the important thing is to really balance it off. You know, we have to look at all the things that they're really strong at and be honest, hey, we need to work on reading. But I think we want to be really careful to say, it doesn't mean they can't read, number one. And number two, I would just, you know, I'm coming on strong, and I don't mean to come on so strong, but when schools fall into a trip, they're not doing, this data does not support the conclusion that we're doing nothing for average students.
I would have to
It just doesn't.
agree. I don't think we can just look at the ACT or the SAT and say that there's something that we're not doing to provide opportunity for our students for growth. There are so many examples of opportunities for growth in this report that you can't just pinpoint one and say, how come this isn't where we want it? I think the main goal is to say, okay, in this section, we want it to be here. How can we work towards getting there for this one place? And it has to be holistic, because if you're looking at a student and their performance in one day of one opportunity and taking that and running with it, I think it is doing a disservice to the students. And I think that you need to look at the growth over time. And I think that one snapshot of 1 year of one day isn't what we should be looking at as a whole.
And at the same time, it doesn't tell you nothing, right? You know, I would
Doesn't tell
say,
you nothing.
so some
However,
things I would, yeah, some
look
things
at
I would take away,
over
right,
time.
are, you know, one, focus on complex reading proficiency. We have to do that, you know, and that is across the board. You'd be surprised. Some very, very strong students just do it by brute force, not by strategy, right? They're not strategic about it, right? They can be more strategic about it. The other thing is things like the 8-period day. You are addressing it because you're going to open up possibilities, right? That's a big, big focus. That's for all students, right? And then the third thing is when you open that up, you say, listen, you know, we know some of you can do better performance on these accountability tests, but we also know you can't afford or you don't have the time to take test prep classes that help you really understand what is this test asking you to do. You just approved making that possible. So I think all of those things, kind of bringing those into the mix, you have a tough job because you're 100% right, Wendy. People want to just go to that proficiency rate, right? So when they go, oh, 60% or whatever that means. So it falls on all of us to really try to explain, what does that mean, right? And it's a little bit like on the school finance side, people don't necessarily have a stomach for complexity, right? I mean, one of the more interesting things you'll wonder next month is, why did proficiency from the SAT to the ACT jump so much? I wish I could show it to you right now, right? But you're going to see a big jump in terms of math and English language arts proficiency. And you're going to see a jump in the growth, right? Well, my argument would be it's a different test, right? Some would argue, I'm not here to do this, is that the SAT is more difficult than the ACT.
Plus, it's a different class, isn't it? Every year.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's sometimes hard to
Different class of
compare.
students.
So just to, you know, play devil's advocate, I guess, and keep this going for another minute or two. So when we're looking at levels of proficiency in reading, when it's on the Illinois report card, it's just the ACT?
It is. That's it.
And who takes that?
Only juniors
Only juniors. So we're literally looking at the proficiency scores of only juniors.
that
And
year.
I understand it's one day, it's one test.
That's such a
I
great
mean,
question.
Everybody's had, you know, a terrible day at work or a terrible day at school. Everybody knows what that's like. So I'm just, I actually did not know that. That's very interesting that it's literally
Right.
just the juniors reading level. That doesn't seem,
And they say they
why
wouldn't
in the
math.
heck are we doing that?
Well,
Why is that how
we need
do
another half
that?
hour to, you know.
Well, I just, I mean,
You gotta do it.
yeah, no, I understand that that's why, but I would be a huge advocate for that's not how we should be deciding whether or not we have a
Well,
52%
so-
reading proficiency.
Someday I'm going to
score.
go out for coffee and I'm going to tell you my whole sob story. I will tell you this, Tammy. Right when the state of Illinois got it right with a test called the PSAE,
Okay,
right when I think we got it right.
yeah,
This is a test that tested Illinois students about what they were learning in high school. Right when we got it right, the state took a right turn to the ACT.
yeah.
Well, they went
again.
ACT first,
And
then they went SAT, and then they went into Park, and so you're not here for my sob story. And I don't mean to be like, oh, más fuerte on this thing, but I just think you are really great public spokespeople, and you're 100% right, Wendy. People should say, well, that's a metric, and they should ask questions, just like we're asking questions at this table, right? Like, you know, why is that? You also are right, Tammy, that one day junior year, and our juniors last year, like Evelyn, were really at a disadvantage because many of you know, we set up 2 practice assessments for them that we couldn't get them done because the ACT couldn't provide us with test codes.
I remember that.
And so our juniors went in with no practice. When Evelyn sat down last year, she had never taken an ACT product, ever. First time, right? And so if she's taken subsequent ACTs to improve her score, and even if she did improve her score, that doesn't end up in that report. But setting that aside, I think both Wendy and Tammy, you have great points. Like, we should be able to explain, gosh, I'd like to see that proficiency rate higher. So would I. And how are we going to do it?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do it with test taking skills. We're going to do it with focusing on reading across the curriculum. We're going to do it with opening up the schedule and asking kids to take more classes.
Right.
Right? You know, so that's, you know, I think really a deliverable for people. That's so important. You're going to see what you've really enacted is the biggest level about what we've been working on with accelerating average level kids into more rigor. I mean, you've really, in the past 2 meetings, flipped many switches that are going to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, right? But these are awesome questions.
Okay.
So, others?
I have a
All right.
question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
On the frequency distribution part, you had mentioned it, I think, on the math as it related to science, but, and I guess it's pertinent, it popped up to me during that point, but even more pertinent based on the discussion we just had. But you can, so remind me, on these bands, you can actually drill down, I think, to see what classes kids are actually taking
Yeah, we can
in the
see-
different band areas?
Yes, you can see if you click on like that blue part, it'll say, you know, disaggregate by, and you can do by student name. And then from there, we would go to Infinite Campus and see, all right, what does that kid's day look like? And so we did that for these bands. And then I thought I added in the next highest band after the composite, which, or the average composite, which was 25. So we looked at, and it's cut off because these were really long.
Yeah.
But the next, if there were to be a red bar on the composite, it would be 25. So we looked at what does the day, what have for the past 3 years, you know, if these kids were
Right.
juniors, what do their freshman, sophomore, junior schedule look like
Right.
compared to?
And then does that lead to discussions or thoughts on maybe classes might need to be altered or restructured? Not the actual what the students are taking, but maybe what's being taught or how things are being taught. I mean, I don't know if I'm not a teacher, so I don't know.
Well,
you know, I could be talking out of my head, but does that relate back to if someone's not scoring well in a particular reading or math? Does that give you that type of data?
Like this, where I got this example from,
Yeah.
this tool, there are options to the side. One that I think is really important that I'd like to do is a curriculum audit. So it will walk you through the skills, and so a PLC could see, you know, we are really kind of just asking kids to locate basic facts on our unit tests. Maybe that's why they're sitting kind of stagnant in this band. But you can do a really cool deep dive into what are you doing in your classes? Are there things that are being completely missed? Or with, like, going back to Tammy's point about them being juniors, sometimes kids who are accelerated, there are questions that they haven't seen since 8th grade math because they're accelerated. And so then the teachers can see if they're missing those things. So,
I think that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool.
I
That's pretty
know.
exciting.
Yeah, that's really the benefit
That's
of
the
these
part I want to get to.
drilling down to the individual kids,
Mhm.
saying, you know, does the student need test-taking skills? Are there curriculum changes that need? That's why this is so helpful. One thing I will say on behalf of the ACT, you know, and I agree, Tammy, you know, one day your junior year, but once we get rolling, and Luann knows this, ACT, I believe, has just done a better job giving us item analysis, giving us growth charts, helping us see exactly where this student isn't performing so we can get really, and address, you know, the really important question that went.
And then
This is they're just better at that.
And then just, I guess the second part to that question, so if you can drill down, how does this information get back to our feeder districts, or does it? And
Yeah.
So they asked for that, Candace, and so in January, Kelly's gonna come. We have like 6 meetings a year, and she's gonna
Oh, that's
come
right.
and teach them about that. I always ask them, like, what kind of data do you want to see so that we're giving it to them? And so that will happen at that meeting. And like I said, that's mostly all the principals come from the center, and if they have like a district curriculum coordinator, that person usually comes too. We'll open it to others. The other thing I would say is we are having articulation meetings between 8th grade, 9th grade, and some 7th grade teachers that we facilitate here. But again, on the back end, Kelly can share this data. Dr. Jen Webray is facilitating those meetings. English built like a common rubric
Yeah.
that they can use for writing, but they can infuse it in those workshops as well.
That's pretty cool.
And we meet, the superintendents meet, it's very exciting. We meet once a month as well, so. And so this, they'll all get a copy of it, we'll go over it next week in our regular meeting, so.
Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for your engagement. For a long time, I've wanted a single meeting, just so we can really, really dig in, to these issues. And obviously, just because if the meeting ends, it doesn't mean the conversation. We'll come back around next month, to look at this fun, headed up look at this that's embargoed from your view. And you're going to see some really interesting things that are going to ask, I'm going to be interested, when do you come back around, and Tammy, to your really keen questions. One little just note, this will be publishing, this is a flip book. This is electronic. It'll be on the website, wanted to have you with the first crack of it, but this will be up. Eric Slager did this as well, so nice job. Over to you, Madam President.
Any announcements? Other than?
Yeah, they're there. Just lots coming up. Gold Card this week. I don't know if there's anybody. We've got our RSVPs for Gold Card. You could come for the dinner, not go to the musical. That's about a 5 o'clock. Kathy would need to know if you haven't committed to the Gold Card Thursday night. She would have to know. Just ordering food, literally, and then the musical's right after.
I don't know. I went my first time last year, and if you've got room in your schedule and you've got the wherewithal to do it, I think you'd find it pretty rewarding and really quite fun. I mean, some of these participants have been coming for years. It's kind of a family thing for them. They're really excited to be there, which I thought was really kind of neat. So if there's room in your schedule, make sure you get in touch with Kathy.
A lot of Lockport Township High School lore.
A lot of Porter pride in that room at the time. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. I'll say aye.
Aye.
7:20, we adjourn.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your engagement.